Today we're going to start looking at numbers that exist that we haven't really talked about before. So these are going to be your negative numbers. And with our negative numbers, we need to know what they are called, and that's where our lesson begins today with the introduction. So I'm introduction to integers. So what are integers? Integers are numbers that are whole numbers and their opposite. So that means what is happening that is completely opposite of them. So those would be where your positives and negatives come into play, or your integers. So we have a number line. And on our number line, we typically start at 0. So our number line typically looks like that. But notice that my number line is going in the opposite direction this time, and we're not used to that. So we normally have our numbers over here. Okay? And we call these our positives. So these would be your positive numbers. Positive numbers typically are written with what you would call a plus sign, so a positive sign in front of them, but we don't show that. We don't put it because it's not necessary. So if you have a number that's written like this and it does not have a sign out front, it means that it is a positive value. Huh? So on the other side of the 0, it's just like a mirror. Everything is happening in reverse. So just like if you stand in front of a mirror and you have words on your shirt, the words would be backwards in the mirror. If you raise your right hand, your mirror image is going to look like you're raising your left hand. So it is moving in the opposite. So at 0, where we would typically have 1 being to the right, we would have -1 being to the left. And so on the right, where we go 1, 2, on the opposite side, on the left side, it would go -1, -2. So as you move through these negatives, you're becoming more and more negative. So it means you're getting further and further away from being a positive number. So on this side, we would say that 5 is greater than 4, but over here, -5 is further away from these positive numbers than -4, so -4 is actually bigger because you're getting closer to the positives. So which number is closer to the positives? It would be -4. So a number that would be closer to the positives than -4 would be -3 and -1. So these numbers are getting bigger than these numbers over here. So these numbers on the left side, we call these the negatives. And we indicate those with a minus sign. It typically sits up a little bit higher than a minus sign, though. It kind of floats around the top of the number. So that is where those belong. So you're asking, well, what about 0? Good question. 0 is neither positive or negative. It's a neutral number. So with Miss Sauer's science class, you've been talking about neutrons inside of atoms and how they don't have a charge. So that is why, because they're a neutral. So they're like having a whole bunch of zeros inside of that nucleus, that neutral charge. 0 also has no opposite. Okay? So if I was to look up here at the top of the number line and ask you, what is the opposite of 2? So what would be the opposite of 2 in the mirror? Well, it would be -2. Okay? So these are opposites. What about if I had -4? Well, its opposite would be +4. Just like that. And what about 6? Well, its opposite would be -6. And remember that 0 does not have an opposite. There is no other 0. Okay? So this is your horizontal number line. We do need to look at another type of number line, and this is called a vertical number line. So that means it would go up and down instead of side to side. Vertical number line. 0 would fall right in the middle. And our positive values would move in an upward trend. While our negative values would move in a downward trend. Just like that. Okay? So when would this be a helpful number line to use? Well, I like to use this one in a situation, maybe I'm talking about a swimming pool. Okay? So the water would be at 0. And maybe you're going to climb up the ladder to the diving board at the swimming pool. So you would climb up the ladder 6 feet into the air so that you could be on the diving board. And then when you dump off the diving board, there's 0. And then you're going to fall below 0. You came all the way down here to -6 feet. So you went 6 feet above the water, and now you're 6 feet below the water. So a positive 6 feet and a negative 6 feet. Okay? So that's a situation where you would want to use a vertical number line. So with these positives and negatives, we need to know what the value of them is. The value is the distance from 0. So we call this its absolute value. Absolute value is a number's distance from 0. Okay, so I'm going to draw another number line so that we can look at it. Put 0 in the middle. Whoops. I'll put some numbers on here for you. Sorry, I messed up right there. So I have my number line with my numbers, and what I'm going to look at is if I went over here to 3 and I wanted to know 3's absolute value. Well, the absolute value, remember we said, is a number's distance from 0. So that would be 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. So 3's absolute value would be 3. Okay. What if I wanted to know what the absolute value of -3 was? So if I'm standing at 0, I'm going to take 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. So -3's absolute value is also 3. So there is no such thing as a negative distance from 0 when we're talking about absolute value. So if I had on my Fitbit and I was going to take some steps, if I'm standing here at 0, I'm going to take 1, 2, 3 steps to get to 3. Well, my Fitbit is going to add 3 steps to me. Okay? If I'm standing here at 0 and I want to walk to -3, I'm going to take 1, 2, 3 steps backwards. Now, backward steps are still steps. My Fitbit did not subtract 3 steps from me. I still did the exercise. I still took the steps. It doesn't care. My Fitbit doesn't care which direction I'm going in. A step is a step. So it's the same thing with absolute value. A distance is a distance, whether it's moving to the right, moving to the left, moving up, or moving down. A step is a step. So when we want to ask how to find the absolute value of a number, we use absolute value bars. So let me show you what those look like. So absolute value bars. Some people call this number gel. It's two little bars like this, and a number would go to the inside of the number. So anytime you see these little bars with a number on the inside, it's asking you to find the absolute value. How many steps away from 0 is that number? So 8 would be 8 steps away from 0. If we did it like this, we're asking what is the absolute value of 3? That would be 3, because it's 3 steps away from 0. What about the absolute value of 1? It would be a 1. Absolute value of -2. Well, let's look. 1, 2. Do you see that? 1, 2. So it'd be 2 steps, and it's 2 steps, not -2 steps. We can't take numbers off of our step count on our Fitbit, okay? What if I wanted to know the absolute value of -8? Well, that would be 8 steps. What about -97? That would be the absolute value at 97. What about 113? 113. What about -438? Be 438. So once again, remember, it's the distance from 0. We don't care if it's positive or negative. It's still a step. It's still a spot away from 0. So what you're going to do after this lesson is you are going to have another video to watch. It's a Math Antics video. He's going to explain the same things I did, just slightly different. And he's got really cool graphics and, you know, funny things that he does that'll help a little bit. And then you're going to take a quizzes. The quizzes is going to ask you questions about identifying positives and negatives, knowing what their opposites are. It's also going to ask you some absolute value questions, and then it's going to ask you some questions about what a number would be with a different situation or scenario. If somebody gained 4 pounds, then that would be a +4. If somebody lost 4 pounds, that would be a -4. If your sister is 5 years younger than you, then that would be a -5. If you're 15 years older than your dog, then that would be +15. If you pay somebody $18, then that's -18 because you're taking it away from you. If somebody paid you $17, that would be +17. So you're going to be looking at all those different situations. Remember that if you take your quizzes more than once, it does tell me. So what I'll do is will take all your scores and I will average them together. You will not just get the highest one. So take your time, do it right, so that way you only have to do it once. And I will take that as your follow-up work grade from today's lesson. All right, 6th grade, have a good day. Thank you.